ownership. What does that mean? Nobody from the first session can answer. What does that mean? Go ahead and say it.
Like it's your child.
Yeah, yeah. Sure, your responsibility. It's your responsibility. Now, when you think about this, somebody else want to say something?
You'll never blame anyone else, no external forces, nothing.
There you go. Okay, good. Now, one of my favorite sayings, I want you to never forget this. If you don't remember anything else that I say today, remember this one. One of my favorite sayings is never allow another person to stand between you and your destiny. What happens many times is we take our future and we place it in somebody else's hands. They don't perform like they should, and then we blame them for us not getting where we want to go. This applies almost every day in my life. There's something, okay? Let me give you a good example. Last year I spoke at this big conference, this big 10X conference. There was 10,000 people there. Mandalay Bay is a great event, biggest event I've ever spoken at. And as soon as I got finished, and it was a big game changer for me because we picked up a lot of business. You know, it was a big stage. It added a lot of credibility to my career. And as soon as we got finished, people started asking me, are you going to speak at the next 10X? Because there's like 10X1 and 10X2 and 10X3. And so I'm sitting there thinking about it, like no matter how, if I did good or didn't do good, if I was performed, there's no guarantee that I'll be asked to come back and do it again, right? So I'm sitting around telling my team, we don't need them to invite us to be at that conference. We should just have our own conference. Because I guarantee I can speak on the stage when it's my conference. You follow what I'm saying? Like when we're waiting on other people and we're dependent on them, we're in a weak position, aren't we? It's like, well, will you have us back? Will you not have us back? Okay, so one of my rules is never allow another person to stand between you and your destiny. If you want to speak to someone, don't expect somebody else to do it for you. Pick up the phone and call them yourself. Pick up the phone and take action on it. Don't allow other people to control your future. And too many people do that. Too many people allow other people to do that. So extreme ownership to me is taking that control back and saying if it don't happen, it wasn't because we didn't try to make it happen. It didn't happen, right? That's what extreme ownership is. Now, on the operational side, this is an interesting dynamic because the salesperson is out there selling something and the operation person is delivering it. There's a different person delivering than the one that's selling it. Does that make sense? And because of that, there's a lot of opportunity to blame throughout the process. And if we make a bold claim, why do we have to make a bold claim in the market, number one? Say what? To stand out, to be relevant. If somebody else is out there making a bold claim, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and you're competing with them, we can do it better. Then if you say we can do it better than them, then you got to back that up, right? But we have to be bold, because if we're not bold enough, nobody even cares. If we're not bold enough, nobody pays attention. If we're not bold enough, then our message, you know, and Whitney has talked about this hero and villain. I think there's a hero and a villain in every deal. You may be the guide here, but in some instances, I think you could be the hero. There is a villain, and the villain is, why would you let somebody else handle something this big as your mortgage? Why would you turn this over to somebody that's not a professional? Why would you see what I'm saying here? So when it comes to extreme ownership, there's going to be a lot of chances in the process for you to blame other people when this doesn't go well. The originator didn't do this, they didn't do this, they didn't do this. Or extreme ownership is where you take total ownership for that loan getting across the finish line, okay? And even the people who are on your team, you take ownership. You take ownership of your part, okay? So that's really what this session is about today. How do you take extreme ownership of something? Okay, how do you take extreme ownership? Even when people don't perform the way they're supposed to, is it because we didn't train them to perform? You know, one thing I found out in my company, we were training people, but we weren't testing them. So we'd train them, that's just exposure, like I'm showing you something, but when we didn't test them, then they messed it up. Then I'd get mad at them. When really, it's my fault because I didn't do a good job of testing them on what I trained them on. And I didn't do it in a pressure situation. Does that make sense? I didn't test them in a pressure situation. So extreme ownership is when a person makes a mistake, me as their leader saying, that ain't your fault, it's my fault. Because if I did a better job training you, you wouldn't make that mistake, right? Okay, that's extreme ownership. Because we just live in such a society where people want to blame each other. There's no responsibility taken. There's no, right? So that's what we're talking about today. What does this concept of the habit of extreme ownership mean as it relates to the the operation side. Now, what is the promise that's being made to the consumer out in the market from Churchill Mortgage? We'll close your loan on time. Every time with little or no stress. I want you to think about that, because that's what we tell people. If that don't happen, then how does a consumer feel? My daughter's five and a half, 6 years old. She's going to new school now. And I guarantee when I ask her, do you like your teacher, it's going to be yes or no. That's how people talk about things in the market too. If you don't close the loan on time, what do they say? They lied to me. That's what people say. They don't write a dissertation. They just say, look, I'm not using them again. There's too many options, right? Look, I did it. It was a stressful experience. I'm not using them again. Okay, I was thinking about the other day, we went to a restaurant somewhere, me and a guy on my team. I said, let's try it out. We tried it out, didn't like it. You know what I said as I'm walking out the door? Won't be back there again. Why? Because there's another restaurant right beside it we could go to. We don't have to go back to the bad restaurant. People look at the same way at mortgages. Did it, gave Churchill a chance, did it, didn't like it, ain't doing it again. Everybody see that? That's how people think, okay? They don't go through, well, I know this one time, let's give them another chance, let's go back. Even if you believe in second chances, people's tolerance in today's world is so thin. Why? Because there's somebody on every corner they can do it with. There's too many options, right? So when I say extreme ownership, here's what I want you thinking. I ain't talking about at your personal level. I am where I am today based on every decision I made up until today. If I don't like where I am, I just need to have a little conference with the person who put me there, right? Which is who? Right. If I don't like where I am, ain't nobody's fault but my own. Because I have placed myself where I am today. I am where I am today based on every decision I have made up until today. People say, well, I got to go to this job, I got to go to this work. No, you don't have to go to this job or this work. You chose to go to this job and this work. Does that make sense? You chose to get involved in the mortgage business. You chose to do these things, okay? Nobody made you do it. You did it, okay? In essence, I placed myself exactly where I am today. Now, early on when I started building my business, I had a buddy of mine who told me, he said, you're going to build this business and you're going to go out there and do all these things you talk about, and one of these days you're going to build this business and you're going to hate it. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you're going to go out there and get so much business that you're actually going to hate doing the very thing you love. And you know what I told him? Never. Never. Until one Sunday, I was looking 3 and 4 months into the schedule, and every day was booked. And in my mind, I was thinking, man, I'm already tired just looking at all that stuff. Who created all that? I did. You understand? Now, every business is designed before there is a business. A poorly designed business has to be redesigned after the fact. So when you're thinking about business design, you're thinking about this concept, in essence, we place ourselves where we are, but if we don't like it, we can do what? We can change it. So as I'm looking at 2019, I'm sitting there going, okay, let me redesign some things so it's more aligned with what I want versus what I do. You understand what I'm saying? There's just things I don't like, change them. Okay? Because what will happen is you get going down a path and doing things because it works, only say, I don't like doing these things. Okay? So for you, I am where I am today. In essence, I place myself exactly where I am today. So if you're going to take extreme ownership, you got to start with yourself. Now, I read a book once on the concept of happiness, and they said 50% of our happiness was determined by our parents, psychologically. If you have negative parents, okay, and you have a tendency to be negative, okay, could be because that was implanted in you. Okay, now think about this. Ownership means I'm going to take ownership of my body, I'm going to take ownership of my mind, I'm going to take ownership of my heart, I'm going to take ownership of my spirit. I'm going to take complete ownership of these things when I come to work. Now look at the bottom one. I will prepare prior to my time at work so that I come with batteries included. Okay? Now what does that mean to an operations person? What does it mean to prepare prior to? Prior to coming to work, what does it mean? How many operations people do you think sit down at night or at the end of the day and map out their next day? Okay? How many do you think should be doing that?
Everybody.
Now, to me, there's a difference between a defensive posture and an offensive posture. An offensive posture is I come into the day and I attack that day. A defensive posture is I come into that day and that day attacks me. You follow what I'm saying? Okay? So what I do is I sit down on Sunday and I look into the future and I start making decisions on I'm talking 3 and 4 months in the future, okay? And then I map out my week, and then I map out my day, and then I come into Monday, and my day is mapped out. So there's no confusion about what I should be doing. So when I show up to work, I'm at work. Follow where I'm going with this? My day's already planned. Do I have issues that come up? Absolutely. Do I have unexpected things that come up? Absolutely. I deal with those issues, and then I do what? Go right back to my plan. So people ask, man, you must plan all the time, you must work all the time? No. I typically spend 15 minutes a night mapping out my next day. And I typically spend, some time on Sunday just drawing it up in a relaxed state. I may be sitting out on the back patio with a yellow notepad, just drawing it up. You see what I'm saying? But what I'm doing is I'm constantly thinking about what? Future. I'm constantly thinking about the future. I'm constantly thinking about how we create or manifest something. Right? I believe we're at our highest point when we're creating. Okay? Just look at the book of Genesis. God created the heavens and the earth. He come out of the gates. He didn't think about it. It doesn't say he sat around and talked about it. It says he created. He worked. He worked. Okay? How many of you get joy from working? Now, let me tell you what I despise. Idle time. I despise having nothing to do. Even when it's me and my 6-year-old daughter, when I say, get in the car, let's go somewhere. Let's get out. Let's get on the bike. Let's ride your scooter. Let's go look at real estate. Let's move and circulate. Let's not just sit and be stagnant. You know what I mean? Okay? Because you know what it's like with a 6-year-old just doing nothing? It ain't any fun. You got to get them involved in something, right? Okay? At least that's what dads do. Dads get their kids, dads want to get them out of the house and get them doing something. Now, so what would it look like for an operations person to come with batteries included? Extreme ownership. Show up every day, I don't got everything mapped out, right? I got a good attitude. I'm smiling, I'm happy, I'm upbeat. Even my positive energy is going to be negative, going to be greater than any negative energy I face in a day. How many of you have a person that you work around every day that just their very presence is like a Debbie Downer? You do, don't you? Everybody does. It's like an aura. When they walk into the room, their energy is just low. It's a low frequency. It's a low energy. It's not a high energy. It's a low energy. See these lights? Light's energy. Darkness is low negative energy, right? So some people, just by their very presence, they walk into a room, it's like, man, what is going on with that person? Probably personally unhappy. Listen, it's hard to be happy at work when you're personally unhappy, right? Probably not engaged with their work, okay? Probably just showing up, going through the motions. Listen, this brings a very low energy, low frequency. Now, what does that attract back into your life? Other low energy people. Fountains do not want to associate with drains. You understand what I'm saying here? Fountains do not want to associate with drains. So when you're thinking about this concept, when I talk about total ownership, I got to get ownership of my mind and my body and my spirit because you say, well, what do you do, Coach Burt, to get in a positive spirit? Listen, by nature, what if I told you by nature I'm a negative person? You're sitting there like, what? You write positive books? No, by nature, I can be incredibly negative. My mom is a very hard-driving person. She can be negative. I have to train myself to be positive every day. Does that make sense? I'm a very no-nonsense person. When I hear excuses, I just lose it. But I'm in the positive motivation business. So what I have to do is I have to kind of get myself geared up for the day. So I get up and I get in some type of exercise. I get in some type of mind frame. I get going. I get started. When I catch myself being negative, I correct myself. You follow what I'm saying? So for me, I even have to take ownership of my thoughts because sometimes I can get down on people. And when I get down on a person, I have a tendency just to move on to another person. You understand what I'm saying? Like when I hear too many excuses from people, I'm just like, I'm out on this. Like I'm not spending a second of time on you, okay, if this is what you're going to do. So I have to train myself. I have to take ownership of all these things. So what I do is I typically change my state with my body first. So the first thing I do every morning is I do some type of exercise, even whether I'm paying somebody to train me. This morning I got out and rode my bike for a couple of miles, listened to a podcast while I'm doing it. I'm getting my mind ready for what my body's about to do. I got to take ownership of my thoughts. Okay? Now, when you're thinking about this concept of batteries included, I really want you thinking about that. Now, here's some ownership thoughts. Between stimulus, that's what happens to you, and your response to what happens to you is a space, and in that space lies your ability to choose your response. So when I've always remembered this. I'll think of it like this. Between what happens to me and my response to what happens to me is a space. And in that space lies my ability to choose my response. So just because you got negative doesn't mean I have to get negative. Does that make sense? Between your stimulus and my response is a space. And in that space lies my ability to choose my response. One of my sayings is never wrestle with a pig. You both get muddy and the pig loves it. You follow me? So when I catch people trying to drag me into negative things during the day, I just stop and catch myself and go, no, between stimulus and response is a space, and in that space lies my ability to choose my response. Now, here's my question. Can I influence the stimulus? Because sometimes your response to the stimulus can actually influence the stimulus. Does that make sense? So when a person is negative toward me, but my response is positive toward them, okay? Like when you get your head up and smile and bring a good frequency, good things happen to you. You'd be shocked how many good things happen to you. People are more open to you. They say hi to you. They're more friendly to you. More opportunity comes your way because of the stimulus that you're creating. Does that make sense? You influence the response. Your response can increase the stimulus. So when you're dealing with a person that's out of control, being negative toward you, your response to them could actually influence them. Okay? I want you to think about that, because in operation role, you're going to hear complaints. There's no way you can serve. How many loans you can do in a month? Typically?
30 per processor.
Okay, 30 per processor, so you're doing a lot. Listen, you deal with that many people, is there going to be problems, yes or no? I tell my team all the time, we're dealing with 600 or 700 people a month. There is no way in the world there's not going to be some complaints, there's not going to be some negative people, there's not going to be some problems, there's not going to be some people call in, there's not going to be some people get negative toward Coach Burton. He's a positive person. You follow what I'm saying? There's going to be some of this. Expect it. It's okay. But how we handle those negatives, we can take a negative to a positive. Okay? When you learn how to take a negative to a positive, you're doing something big. Some of you deal with people and they bring a negative energy. How do you influence their stimulus? Okay? Here's one of my sayings. I don't whine, I don't complain, I don't make excuses. I don't whine, I don't complain, I don't make excuses. Okay? 3, I will bring 2 solutions to every problem. Most employees are not trained to bring solutions to the equation. They just bring what? Problems. Hey, this don't work right, this don't work right. They don't come and say, you know what? I've been sitting around thinking about 3 or 4 ways we can solve this problem. Let me see if we can fix this before it even becomes a problem. Or I've noticed this is a problem, okay? I'll control my mental energy. I will grow a higher awareness of how my physical energy affects other people. Okay? These are ownership issues, okay? Now, this all started, this extreme ownership concept, with a book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, who's a Navy SEAL. And he went into battle and some of his men died, and he got in a scenario where his commander asked him what happened, and he said, it's my fault. Even though people under his guidance made mistakes that they had been trained in not to make, he took responsibility for the whole thing. He said, they're on my team. They made mistakes, but it's my fault. That's extreme ownership. Okay? For you, you got to start asking yourself this question. Where are areas of my life I need to take extreme ownership that I've been blaming other people? Okay? Look at that bottom one. I will grow a higher awareness of my physical energy and how it affects other people. I would tell you as a salesperson, the way a salesperson thinks is we're trying to create revenue. We're trying to put deals together. We're trying to make things happen. It ain't easy. It may take 6 months to get one meeting to open the door to one thing. Okay? So sometimes the friction is between me trying to explain, look how hard we're trying to put this deal together, and I got a passion and intensity for this. And I want you to have that same passion and intensity on how we put it together so it's a good experience here. Because there's a concept called churn. Churn is the number of people who use you that opt out of using you. Does that make sense? So the question would be, how many people that use Churchill one time come back a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time? And what is the actual churn rate of people using you and then not ever coming back and using you again? Does that make sense? Now, if they're paying on a monthly basis, it'd be easy to measure, right? We got a 10% churn rate, we got a 15% churn rate. But I asked my pastor once at church what our churn rate was, and he didn't know. And I said, well, we really need to know this, because if we have 100 people coming to visit, but we're losing 100 people every weekend, we're not growing. Now, if we have 100 people coming to visit, 50 of them stay, and only 15 of them leave, you see what I'm saying? I said that's a number we should be measuring. Because churn is, I was involved, and now I no longer want to be involved. Does that make sense? Now, that costs a lot of money to a business when people churn out. So I'd like to keep my churn rate at 4 to 6%, which is incredibly low and incredibly hard. But I believe in customer engagement, not customer service. I believe in customer service, but I think a higher level is customer engagement. And engagement is, I'm going to engage with you. I'm going to engage with you like crazy. Why? Because I want you telling other people about us. I want to communicate with you, right? So I try every mechanism I can to communicate. So I want to stop right here, and I want you to say, as it relates to operations, where do you think our extreme ownership breaks down? Where do you feel like there's too much blaming that goes on? Where could we take better control of this right now as it relates to the experience? And, you know, I don't expect you to talk about your own personal life, but there's probably areas in your personal life that you need to take ownership of, right? Ownership of your thoughts. If you get around other people and influenced negatively, you know, maybe you don't need to hang around those people. If you get in trouble when you go certain places, maybe you don't need to go those places. If you can't do things that you want to do because of certain things, then you understand what I'm saying? There's certain things we got to say, man, I need to take ownership of these things. So take a second right now and talk about those within the operations unit. Where do you think there needs to be more ownership of this concept of extreme ownership? Okay? Take a second and talk about that. Don't be shy. All right. Let me show you something that I think is real critical. A few months ago, maybe last year, we did a session on confusion. That was this year. And I want you to think of confusion as a problem that appears to have no immediate solution to it. Confusion is randomness in motion, basically. What I have found is that many times that confusion is created when we're not clear on what people are supposed to do, what the expectations are, and what the consequences are. You follow what I'm saying? So we actually create the confusion, and I sat down one day and I drew out everything everybody was supposed to do in my company, and I literally drew out who was supposed to turn the lights on, who was supposed to turn the music on, who was supposed to do this, and here's the thing. I gave it to them, I talked about it, and then I moved on. What do you think happened? Next month, I'm like, what happened? If you don't reinforce that message every time, this is how it's supposed to be done. You're in charge of turning the lights on. You're in charge of doing this. Remember I was talking about this last month? We're going to keep going. I'm going to keep reminding you every month until we get it right. And maybe I got to keep reminding you. Here's what I said. Even though you explain it to people, if you don't test them, it don't matter. You got to explain it. You got to teach them. You got to test them. You got to track them. Left to people's own devices, I'm telling you, the natural tendency of any person in the world is to contract to a place of comfort. That means they will take the easy way out if you don't hold them accountable over and over. So just remember, I want you thinking about, where is confusion created in my system? Where is it at? Where does ownership need to get better? Because when my people are confused and they weren't doing it, I blamed it on me. Said, you know what? It's not your fault, it's my fault. Because I didn't sit down and explain this again to you. Right? I'm the one explaining the value. No different than what we're teaching the LOs here. If rate is an issue and people are not taking action because they think the rate's too high, then the LO needs to get better articulating the value of why the rate is what it is and what the value of working with Churchill is. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Not complain about the rate. Get better at explaining the value. Okay? Get better at overcoming objection. Get better to articulate why you should work with us versus anybody else. Okay? If you're complaining about somebody you work with, I would ask you, what can you do to make the situation go better? What can you do to create a better situation, increase that stimulus? What confusion are you creating that you could avoid, okay? So just remember this. Am I clear in my instruction? Now, let me go back one thing. This is the vicious cycle we all start with, by the way. We start with good intention. We get inspired and motivated. I'm going to be better. Whatever it is. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. We all start with good intention, right? Then we fall off the wagon. Why do we fall off the wagon? It's human nature to fall off the wagon. Okay? We can go all the way back and blame Adam and Eve if we want to. Right? We can go all the way back to the beginning and say, hey, but we all start good, fall off the wagon, and then we experience guilt. You know why where we have guilt? We're grieving something. You know what we're grieving? What we could have done, what we should have done, what we're capable of doing, but we didn't do it.
Yeah.
We're grieving our lost potential. Now, how does this tie into this? The only person that's in charge of your potential right now is you. And I always joke and say, if a person's telling you got potential at 42 years old, it ain't a compliment. It was cute at 14. Okay? But at 42, what are they saying to you? Get your act together. You know how many moms and dads come up to me when I'm out there speaking and say, hey, which one of your books? I got a son, he's 25 years old, sleeping on the couch eating Cheetos till noon. Can't get his life together. Which one of your books will change his life? And I'm like, well, I don't know which one will change his life. Okay, we'll sell you this ain't no practice life. That's a good one to start, but I ain't guarantee it's going to change his life. You follow what I'm saying? We need to get him to take ownership of what's going on here, extreme ownership, okay? That means I don't know what job he needs to be in, but we need to get him up and get him going to one. We need to get him working. I'm trying to implant this in my daughter at 6 years old. You know how hard that is? You know how good at stalling and making excuses 6 years olds are? They're masters, man. But here's what's funny. I hear the same excuses out of 40-year-olds. Well, hang on. Well, let me do this. Well, let me get this done. Well, this didn't work. Well, you know, it's the same excuses, man, 40 years later. Right? We're doing a control group right now of people who said they wanted more accountability from me. So I said, fine. First, to get in the course, you got to do these 6 things. That weeded 50% of them out because they wouldn't even do that part. Then I said, look, I will kick you out of this group if you're not on there every Monday with me and you don't turn your homework in every Monday. How many of you think turn your homework in? Maybe 5 or 6. But hold on, you told me you needed more accountability. You told me you wanted to see me more. You told me you wanted to talk to me more. I'm giving you that opportunity. Now what? You don't want it. It gets hard. When it gets hard, people start, right, quitting, contracting. They don't take extreme ownership of what's going on. They wait on somebody else to do something for them. So here's the deal. It ain't my future, it's yours. That's what I tell people. You got to take extreme ownership of that future, okay? So when we leave here today, I want you to say areas that you have been pushing off or blaming or making excuses. I want to go back to these things. These are things you're going to eliminate when you go back. I'm going to eliminate complaining, whining, and making excuses. I'm going to change how I see other people, remove judgment from my system. I'm going to embrace some compassion. What are they going through? I'm going to value the heart and contribution of other people. Can you be intense and positive at the same time? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. I embrace intense but positive. Okay? Some people get intense and they get negative. You don't have to get negative when you get intense. Okay? But I do think this concept of ownership is really, really big. The habit of extreme ownership. How does it relate to making your realtor calls? How does it relate to making your communications every single week? I'm going to take extreme ownership of the communication. Okay? Now here's extreme ownership. The customer should only call 2 times. If they have to call more than 2 times, then we didn't do something right. They call once to see if they should use us. They call once after it's over to tell us how great it was. If the consumer has to call and say what's going on with the loan, what's happening, then in essence, that violates the concept of 2 phone calls. See what I'm saying? Okay? Now, has everybody been trained in how to handle a criticism or a complaint? Okay? And if you haven't, you need to be trained in this because we teach a concept about when a complaint comes in, A, we take ownership of that complaint. Thank you. Okay? I listen, I acknowledge, I isolate. Is there any other reason? Is there anything else outside of this one thing that you're frustrated about? And they say, no, this is just the one thing. Okay, thank you for calling. We do need to get better at that. If we did get better, would you hang in there with us and give us another chance to show you we can do it right? You see what I'm saying? I want to use a formula when I get complaints because I'm going to get complaints. You're going to get complaints when you go out into the marketplace. You need to be able to handle it, but you need to take complete ownership. What do most people do when they get complaints? They get defensive. Once they get defensive, now we're in an adversarial position. Now it's me versus you versus me fighting for you. Hey, look, we're on the same team. I'm fighting for you. I want to get this loan done for you just like you do. We're doing everything we can on our end. Let me give you an update. I'm sorry I haven't given that update already. It's my fault. See what I'm saying? I'll do better. Okay? If you hang in there with me, we're going to get this puppy across the finish line and get you in that beautiful house. Redirect that energy to a positive, okay? Everybody see some areas you could go to work on extreme ownership? I know just by teaching this class, it's a reminder to me. There's all kinds of areas that we could do better with working with our people. So when you walk out of here today, we don't whine, we don't complain, we don't make excuses. Imagine if we learned that at 5 or 6 years old. Wouldn't it be awesome? We don't whine, we don't complain, we don't make excuses. What do? We show up, we grow up, and we deliver every day. And when we deliver every day, people can depend and rely on us, okay? Thank you guys for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Elimination.